Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at the Battle of Ascalon that happened on the 12th of August 1099. So like I mentioned in a previous video, there was still action following the capture of Jerusalem on July 15th, 1099, after the First Crusade. And I claimed that essentially that the First Crusade really hadn't ended with the capture of Jerusalem. And I also claimed that there was a Fatimid army heading north to take Jerusalem or defend it. Well, in this video, we're going to look at essentially the final action of the First Crusade and the fate of that Muslim army. So following the capture of Jerusalem on July 15th, Godfrey of Bouillon was then named Defender of the Holy Sepulchre on July 22nd. Following that, Arnulf of Coquilles was named Patriarch of Jerusalem on August 1st. Now, following this, on August 5th, a relic of the True Cross was discovered. Now, this, of course, is quite a large event in terms of religion and Catholicism, as essentially, of course, the cross hadn't survived as one whole piece. So they were always finding bits and bobs of it. In fact, you can go to most churches in Rome, for example. There's a hotel in Rome, Domus Caesariana, where you can then, there's a church connected to it, and you can go view bits of the crown of thorns and a piece of the true cross. So in the Catholic Church and Catholic faith, there's quite a few pieces of the true cross, probably enough to make 3 of them. Who knows? But soon after, Fatimid advisors arrived in Jerusalem and essentially told the Crusaders to leave, otherwise they'd be destroyed. However, the Crusaders were quite cocky at this point for the fact that they'd taken Jerusalem and essentially steamrolled the Seljuks. And in this way, the Fatimids. So they simply ignored them and got them to leave. And on August 10th, Godfrey of Bouillon led the remaining Crusaders to Ascalon. Now, Ascalon was a city under Fatimid control at the time, one of the few remaining cities near Jerusalem. In fact, it was only a day's march away. And while this happened, Peter the Hermit, yes, who I mentioned in my previous videos, as the man who led the People's Crusade and survived, he led both Catholic and Orthodox Christians in prayers. Now, not only was the relic of the True Cross brought with Godfrey, he also brought the Holy Lance of Longinus, and that was brought as well. Now, that is, of course, the spear that was jabbed into Christ's side by the Roman soldier to confirm that Christ was dead, and that is now currently residing in Austria. I'm not sure where. Now, the Fatimid army was led by Vizier, and you're going to have to forgive me on the butchering of this name, Al-Afdal Shah, who commanded 20,000 troops. Now, the Crusaders at this point had an estimated 10,200. Now, some sources do claim that the Crusaders had 20,000 to match the Fatimids. However, that is very unlikely due to the fact that they'd obviously just arrived in Jerusalem only about a few months prior. So they didn't have that many. Now, at this point, they took quite a few days to actually search for the Fatimid army as they were camped out, and they discovered them on the 12th of August in the morning, and they found the Fatimid army, and they marched towards them. Now, the Fatimid army was actually camped outside Ascalon, and so the Crusader army marched forwards in 9 divisions with different parts of the Crusader armies based on like what leader they were under in different areas. Now, there are many different accounts of what really happened during this battle. Some like to claim that the Fatimids were quite unprepared and that the battle was quite short, and that tends to be the most done claim. And this is backed up by Christian chroniclers and Muslim. However, there is one Christian chronicler, Albert of Aix, that claims the Egyptians were prepared and that the battle lasted for hours. However, he most likely tried to say that to glorify the Crusaders' victory, as again, 10,000 out of 200. Now, all that we do know about the actual battle itself is that the soldiers were fighting using bow and arrow until close enough to hand-to-hand fighting, very similar to most other medieval battles at the time. And it is credited that the Crusaders won due to the fact that the Fatimid heavy cavalry was not ready to fight. Now, that, of course, is quite a big moment, as although perhaps, as we know that the Fatimids did surround the Crusaders at one point and break through their rearguard, without heavy cavalry, you're not going to be able to do much, especially considering the Crusaders were made up very much of heavy infantry. Now, what do I mean by heavy infantry? I'm talking mostly dismounted knights or mounted knights. So if the Fatimids did not have their heavy cavalry ready, then that, of course, is a big problem. As it essentially means that the Crusader heavy cavalry and just heavy infantry can run rampant. And another problem was that Al-Afdal, the Vizier, he panicked in the battle. Now, that, of course, is never a good moment. If you panic mid-battle, it never goes well, and he made the choice to retreat with his army into Ascalon, which, like I mentioned, was in Muslim control. Now, overall casualties are unknown, as, again, this is a very much an overshadowed battle. but it is estimated that about 10,000 Muslim soldiers died in the battle. Now, the reason why, of course, this battle isn't really well recorded is obviously it happened just after the fall of Jerusalem, where most people just claim that the First Crusade ended. However, of course, nowadays we like to say that it's after the Battle of Ascalon. Now, following this, the Crusaders spent the night in the abandoned camp outside of Ascalon, expecting that the Muslim forces would come out and make another counterattack. Now, that isn't a bad assumption, as of course the Ascalon had a garrison in it, and if 10,000 troops were killed, as you'd say, the Muslims would have had another 10,000 plus the garrison. So in theory, they could have made a counterattack and potentially beaten the Crusaders. However, that never happened. They soon learned that the Fatimid army was retreating to Egypt, while Al-Afdal fled on a boat, as he did bring ships with him. Now, soon the Crusaders, after this, realizing that there was no one coming and that they were essentially left alone, they began to plunder everything. Now, they took two of the most important symbols of an army. First of all, they took the standard of the army. Now, the standard of an army at this period in time is very important to them. Not only does it symbolize their morale, it also is essentially used to rally the army around one point in case the battle spreads out. In fact, it was so important that the Knights Templar, for example, were punished with death if their standard bearer lowered the standard. And they also stole Al-Afdal's tent. Now, the tent, of course, is important as it is a sign of his richness. And then the Crusaders returned to Jerusalem on August 13th, the same day they were losing. Now, although it was a Crusader victory in Ascalon, well, not in Ascalon, but around Ascalon, it actually remained in Fatimid hands until the 22nd of August, 1153. So just over 50 years later was when Ascalon was taken. And in fact, Ascalon was used as a staging ground for multiple Muslim incursions into the Holy Lands to attempt to defeat the Kingdom of Jerusalem. And one of the reasons this happened and why it wasn't taken is because the two princes who were meant to get it were constantly fighting over it, and when they finally both submitted their demands to the garrison to surrender, the garrison simply denied it. Now, one of the reasons they then didn't go and directly take it is many of the knights left. Immediately after this last battle, many of the knights left, as the First Crusade was not meant to be a permanent staying in the Holy Land. In fact, many of the knights who went there simply had sworn oaths to their local clergymen to go there, fight, retake Jerusalem, and return home, which is something that you then don't see to happen too much in the later Crusades, where most people go there to actually establish themselves permanently. Another reason is that there was this palm tree, which I know I can't remember the name of, not great, but it is a holy palm that was essentially where the Crusader Knights would go and take a palm leaf from, and they'd bring it back, and it would be put on the altar. Anyone who's more into the Bible or has read it more will know the tree I'm talking about. However, the knights that did stay would eventually form the Knights Hospitaller, which were the knights responsible for making sure that the pilgrims were, of course, being healed, looked after well, had medical care. The Knights Templar, who were originally founded to protect the pilgrims on the Holy Land, and the Order of the Holy Sepulchre. Now, the Order of the Holy Sepulchre was founded by Godfrey of Bouillon, who, of course, was king of Jerusalem, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, at the beginning, instead of the Baldwins. But, of course, their names weren't actually Baldwin. Well, they were, but that's a kingly name. So that was established essentially just to protect the Holy Sepulchre, to basically allow other knights to be freed up for militaristic action. Thank you for watching.